Okay, Riza, they were sent to riza.w. Okay. All right, I'm just trying to send those pictures to you. You should have them now. So Zhangpo, you want to say things, or should I just do that? How fun. I see a few, yes. Okay.
Good morning, everyone. It is such an honor and privilege to introduce Lyle Weinstein. He is one of the very long-time student of the Kenjan Tangur Rinpoche. And today he's going to give you the talk about the caregiving as a spiritual discipline. And he is also the author of a few books about Alzheimer's and to how to deal with the people. And he has lots of experience as he has researched and he has published a book. So hope and it might help people out there. So who sometimes are a little bit. Sometimes people feel a little bit uncomfortable to come forward, but during this teaching, so the Lyle would guide you through the how to deal with the patient with the spiritual and as well as in a daily basis life. And thank you so much, and good morning to you all. And please, you can go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning. Welcome. A few preliminary comments. If possible, if there are questions, it would be good to type them into the chat. Makes it easy to do as many Q&A things at the end as possible. If you have questions during the program, put them in the chat. If you have questions after the program, our website, you can contact me through our website, MontessoriAlzheimersProject.com, and I'll do my best to answer them. So, my name is Lyle Weinstein. I am a longtime student of Trungpa Rinpoche, whose monastery this is, that has been kind enough to sponsor this broadcast, allow us to do this. I'm also the author of the Alzheimer's Family Manual and the co-author of the Montessori Alzheimer's Project. These are two books that are available specifically targeted towards caregivers, family caregivers, for their loved ones who have dementia. My work with caregivers is the direct result of my father being diagnosed with Alzheimer's when he was 54 years old and living for about 15 years after that. He did not die of any intervening cause. There was no cancer or strokes or anything like that. So I had a front row seat, so to speak, from the beginning of the illness through the end when he passed away. During that period of time, I originally created an audio tape for family caregivers that eventually became the Alzheimer's Family Manual. And I did work for the Santa Barbara Alzheimer's Association, where I was a director, establishing support groups, meeting with families, and there's background noise. Okay, so we'll do our best to try to eliminate the background noise. I apologize. So the inspiration for this talk is that there have been several members of the Trungpa community in different places in North America who recently have contacted me knowing of my books or my past work, seeking advice about dealing with their parents with dementia. So this is taking place in a Buddhist monastery, Trungpa Rinpoche's monastery. It is not a Buddhist talk per se. One doesn't have to be a Buddhist to listen to this. Spirituality is not limited to one religion, and caregiving as a spiritual discipline is applicable, I believe, to everyone. So we'll begin with generosity. Generosity is a keystone virtue in the human tradition. It's the foundation to caregiving in general, and specifically it's critical to experiencing caregiving as a spiritual path. We're all familiar with material generosity, where we help people giving them money or things and stuff like that. But the deepest kind of generosity, the most difficult and the most important, is how do you protect someone from fear? Protecting from fear, that's the core of caregiving as a spiritual discipline. There's a very famous text where it talks about what protecting from fear means. It means giving refuge. There's a slight gap there. Providing refuge for those who have no place of refuge, protecting those who have no protector, and being with those who have no other companion. If you think about it, those three things are critical for anyone with dementia. They need a refuge, they need a protector, and they need a companion. So generally speaking, before we become ill, we kind of have our own refuge. We're kind of comfortable in our house. If there's a problem, we know we can dial 911. We're comfortable being alone. We're comfortable being with friends, all within reason. But when you have dementia, you can see it how people with dementia express themselves, whether it is with agitation, whether it is with turning away, whether it is with panic, whether it's sadness. All of these things are connected with their fear. The fear exists because there's nowhere that they feel fundamentally safe. They're incapable any longer really of protecting themselves or seeking protection, not necessarily knowing what 911 refers to at all. They're unsafe alone, and they're uncomfortable with others because they're losing the reference point of what it means to interact or to not interact. So the loss of reference points they're personal, they're with family, they're with society, and they're all an expression of the disease as it progresses. So how can we as caregivers actually express this deepest, most important kind of generosity? How can we make someone we're caring for feel safe? How can we make them feel protected? How can we make them feel like it's possible to relax in a familiar environment? Even if they don't recognize who you are, they don't recognize your name. First thing to understand is that their reference points are dissolving. They're not nearly as solid as they once were. So we have to accept that they're struggling to trust their own perceptions. They're struggling basically to trust their own mind. Their capacities are weakening. So the initial step is, how do we invite this person we care about and that we are caring for to begin to trust our perceptions? How do we do this? We could do this by providing them a linkage to our reference points. And it's based on you, as the caregiver, being the stable reference point that they experience. You can communicate this through words. As the disease progresses, words become more difficult to be the vehicle of communication. Body language becomes ever more important. You can communicate the reference points through touch, through guiding with your hands, through holding someone's hands, through looking at them directly in the eyes, through speaking simply and directly. All of these ways of doing this are ways where you're giving someone access to you as a reference point. So in these ways, you can project your stability. It may seem odd, given the intensity of caregiving, which becomes a 24-hour project. 24 hours a day. It does not seem to end. There's no necessarily the personal space you're used to. There's no personal time like you used to have. You may not think you're so stable. How can you project stability if you don't think you're so stable? You have to look at what is stable. And what is stable is the fundamental affection you have for this person you're caring for. That's what you're projecting. Even if you feel shaky inside, look at that fundamental caring. So in doing this, you have to be able to care for yourself, and you have to be able to care for yourself in a way that you are becoming more and more protected from fear, which does arise. So how can you be protected from fear in the face of seeing someone you love and their reference points begin to dissolve in front of you? Fear is connected intimately with hope. But if you temper your hope, you can temper your fear. So the path, as well as the goal, with this caregiving from a spiritual point of view, is you want to eliminate obstacles that you will encounter, you want to eliminate obstacles that the person you love will encounter. We can do this by adjusting the environment. And the adjustments that eliminate obstacles, they're not about hoping everything is going to go back to the way it was, because it's not. It's not about fearing that it won't get worse, because as the disease progresses, things will become more difficult. So going beyond hope and fear, you make adjustments in real time that will enable you and your loved one to live a safe and sane life. To be able to make adjustments as the disease progresses, as needed. So to eliminate the obstacles, the way we do it in the discussion that's in the Montessori Alzheimer's Project is to simplify, to standardize, and to provide orienting keys through signage. There's another point we talk about, which does not have to do with eliminating obstacles, but it has to do with leading your loved ones away from confrontations with obstacles, and we do this by redirecting them. So if you think about how we navigate the world, we kind of have our memories and we call them up to make sure we know where we're going to go, what we're going to do, how we're going to get there, all of those things. But under the weight of the illness, with dementia, you start losing access to those memories that we don't even think about as being something we have to work to grab. What happens is they begin to experience everything in their life as a test, and it's a test they're frightened of failing, and it's a test that they will fail. So the idea is to eliminate the testing quality in the environment so that they relax. So just as a simple example, you can greet your person that you love, that you care for, that is ill. You can say, "Hi, do you remember me? You know my name, right?" That can only be experienced as a test. And the panic, the gap, do I know that name? Do I not know the name? You can see the fear in their face. Instead, you could greet them with, for example, as I did with my father, "Hi, Dad, it's Lyle, your son. It's so good to see you again." Rather than a test, I gave them my name, I gave them the relationship, I gave him how happy I was to see him again. So he knows I saw him in the past. In this very moment, I've given him cues as to who I am, why I'm here, and that I am a safe person. So, one test, one reassurance. The generosity of giving someone reassurance is a way that you're protecting them from fear. So simplifying and standardizing the environment eliminates, many opportunities for confusion. So let's see if I can actually share something on a screen. Let's see. Oh, Riza, can you, okay. So if what we can do here is we can show the cupboard that has no Q on it. Can we put that on the screen? Let's see. The miracles of technology. So, if there's a cupboard door with no message on it, do we have any idea what's behind that cupboard door? Maybe yes, maybe no. Is this... We'll just check to see if the technical side of this is working. Did you get it? I will try. What's behind that cupboard door? We have no clue. Absolutely no clue. That's the way it works. If you cannot remember a cupboard door that you have opened in your kitchen hundreds or thousands of times, and all the cupboard doors look the same, it's just panic. Excuse me? It's not showing on, okay, it's showing on my screen.
So unclick it and then click it back on.
Stop share.
Yeah, stop share and then click on the picture again.
Okay. How about that? Is that showing? Maybe yes. If it is, good. If not, then it's not. So, ooh. Here's a cupboard door with a cue. Okay. We're having some technical difficulties, I apologize, so I will just continue without the pictures. Essentially, if you have a cupboard door and behind the cupboard door are glasses, and you don't remember that that's where the glassware is, you're leading someone to panic. If you put a picture of the glasses that are behind the cupboard door, you're giving them a cue. This is what's behind here. You can have glasses, and you can have a picture. This is a very simple way to help someone navigate a room that they were in and out of thousands of times, that they no longer have the actual information that they can access. So the generosity starts to become, what am I willing to do to modify my environment to make my loved one feel safe? So if you think about it, we have lots of things that make our house our house. Very simple. But if you think about your house, all of the doors in your house generally look pretty much the same inside. Yes, that's a cupboard. Yeah, okay. And then we're going to do this kind of half manual, half technical. And there's with a cue. So behind there are where the glasses are. So that's it for right now. Okay. So if you think about it, if all the doors in the hallway look the same, how do you know which door is the bedroom, which door is the washroom? You can put a sign up there so that your loved one can navigate their home in ways that they couldn't just a few moments before. So if you have a washer and dryer behind a closet door, you can label washer and dryer and have a picture of the washer and dryer. I'll make one comment about washrooms. We use the word washroom because we don't usually want to say toilet, because toilet has the connotation of being dirty. But if you ask somebody with dementia, do you want to go to the washroom? They may very reasonably say, I'm not dirty, I don't need to wash. That's their answer, and it's the correct answer. So we don't use euphemisms. We actually say directly what we want to say. Do you need to use the toilet? You put on that door the word toilet. You have a picture of a toilet so that it is very clear what's behind that door. And again, this isn't going to look like the house that you really wanted to have for yourself. Most people want the house to look kind of clean and nice and not with all these funny signs. But if it makes your loved one's life easier, it has phenomenal power. identifying the door behind which the toilet is, to the extent that it eliminates a toileting accident, it will make your life so much better. It will make their life so much better. They will not have embarrassing moments, or at least not as many. You will be able to guide them in a gentler way, in a direct way, that actually gives them something that they can access that they couldn't access again as the disease takes those reference points away. So think about how stressful it would be to get up in your own home and no longer remember where the toilet is, or no longer remember where the bedroom is, or no longer remember where the kitchen is. Think how kind and generous it would be if someone actually made a sign so that you could navigate your own home. This is generosity, true, deep generosity. That was a very brief primer on generosity as one of the bases for protecting from fear. So then you have to think about discipline. Discipline, you know how you're supposed to move through space. You know how you're supposed to get here or there. You know how you're supposed to do this or that. But again, when you lose the reference points, it's not so easy anymore. So someone with dementia may not know where they're walking to. They may walk into a room and absolutely forget why they went in there. They may start going somewhere that they know where they're going, and something interrupts them. Someone says hello, and their mind shifts, and they cannot get back the thought, where was I going? So again, your discipline is to be very clear that you need to protect them from fear. So when you're going to go for a walk, you hold their hand. You loop their arm in your arm, and then they are guided by the sense of touch, which is actually one of the last things to leave in the progression of this illness. That sense of touch is incredibly kind. Just do that. So, speech, how are you disciplined in your speech? Again, we think about generosity being, oh, I want to give them so many choices, so many different things to eat, so many different places to go. Maybe when they weren't ill, that was a wonderful thing. Let's go to the new restaurant in town. But now, that's not so helpful. So instead, phrase the questions where they can be answered as yes or no. Do you want an English muffin? Yes or no? If the answer is yes, you're done. If the answer is no, you can then offer one more thing, and then one more thing. That makes it easy. They don't have to hold the thought of what is an English muffin and hold the thought of what is a banana and compare which one they want. They can just yes, no. So again, you're adjusting the environment of words to where they can have a much better chance of not experiencing that as an obstacle. So here's another thing that you can do from the point of view of discipline that will help you and help this person that you love. Our bodies kind of work the same way day after day for the most part. If you take the time, you make a little log and you say, okay, I'm going to give my spouse or my mother or father, whatever it is, a glass of water. Pay attention and make a note of when they need to use the toilet. People's bodies process liquids about the same amount of time with every drink. When the liquid goes in and when the liquid has to come out. And if it's about 20 minutes, you will know that after the first few times. So then, just before 20 minutes elapse after you've given them a drink, you actually get up and guide them towards where the toilet is. And then when you get to the toilet area, you can say, maybe we could use the toilet now. Again, what you're doing is you're taking your discipline because their body is no longer giving them messages that they understand. They are not getting the messages the way they used to. So it's true with liquids, it's true with food. Your body processes things in about the same amount of time, day after day after day. So again, none of these things are going to work all the time. Nothing that any caregiver tells you as a tip is going to work all the time. But for every time that it does work, it puts you at ease, it puts your loved one at ease. And some of these things will work very often, like how long it takes before giving someone a drink that they need to use the toilet. So, your discipline is to collect the information, your discipline is to apply the information. So, the other thing, we talked about how you don't need to go do new things all the time with this person that you love. Routines are very helpful because they take the guesswork out of life. They take the challenge out of life for the person who's not well. So look back at the end of your day and see what worked during the day, see what didn't work. Not from the point of view of criticism, but from the point of view of applying discipline so that you avoid the main issues that have caused trouble in the future. You start to recognize the signs earlier and earlier, which leads to what happens when things aren't working. We lose our patience. This happens. You are asked every 2 to 3 minutes the same question again and again and again and again and again, and by the end of hearing it 10 times in a row, you may lose your patience. There will be times that you will lose your patience. It happens because we're human beings. So caregiving is a path, and because it's a path, we can experience feedback and we can make changes. So we do this by generating further patience. And the way to generate further patience in this case is to understand that the content of what they're saying is not the real issue. The real issue is they're looking for connection, they're looking for reassurance, they're looking to feel safe. So with that, you can listen. You can not contest what they are saying. You cannot debate them from the point of view of what the logic of the situation is. Instead, you can acknowledge that this is what they see, this is what they experience, this is what their world is, and then you can redirect them. You can say, yes, and I think it's time to water the plants now. Let's go water the plants, just very gently. Or let's go have a cup of tea. All of these things are kind. All of these things are generous. All of these things require your discipline to shift how you historically have lived your life. So this requires effort. There's no question about it. But what kind of effort? What kind of exertion? Exertion is definitely needed in caregiving. But it's not a question of exerting yourself to run at full speed all the time, again, every day, until you break down. Again, that's a false understanding of generosity here. We think, I'm so generous, I will use up my entire life force. That's not so good. You can use the exertion properly. You can be generous to yourself. You can be generous to this person that you love, and you can do it by not criticizing yourself, by looking at exertion as a reminder to reorient yourself, to reorient your speech, to reorient how you move, to reorient how you touch someone, to reorient your environment. So, I actually do believe that the power of exertion here is that it's an antidote to hopelessness. And why would that be the case? Yes, this person you love is sick. Yes, they're not going to get better in any conventional way. But by applying these things, you can see how the efforts you make will make a difference in their life right in front of you, on the spot. You can protect someone from fear. It's extraordinary. It's actually extraordinary that this is, in my opinion, the miracle of discipline. That when you protect someone from fear genuinely, face relax, you see their body relax, you see them exhale and be at ease. Your own heart will just open, expand. This can happen. This will happen. Okay, meditation, we're here in this beautiful monastery. If you do practice meditation, that's great. You should do meditation possible. You can remember that even a single mindful breath is meditation, and it has benefits. Sending and taking, a practice which is to generate compassion for those that are suffering. You can focus it of which you are one. So you should include yourself for the caregivers and the ones being cared for. If you're not someone who practices meditation, that's fine. Absolutely fine. But understand that allowing your mind to relax can have an incredibly positive impact on your caregiving and on the person that you are. So you could go for, they call it forest bathing now, you could go for a walk in the woods and actually allow yourself to relax as you walk in the woods. If you can't walk in the woods, just go for a walk, and you will notice these drops closer and closer to the ground, lower and lower. Stand up straight, raise your gaze, and look out to the horizon. Very simple, very quick, and it is actually a way to recharge your batteries, to cleanse your mind, even just briefly, but it's something you can do again and again as you need to. A dear friend of mine suggested something for non-meditators, which is to you can hold up your hand, and with the other hand you can take your finger and you breathe in slowly, out slowly, as you go up to one finger and then down between the next finger, and then up and down, up and down, up and down. So 5 breaths, or going back for a total of 10 breaths, takes very little time, but it engages your eyes, it engages your breathing, it engages your focus, it engages your sense of touch. All of those things will give you a break. All of those things will allow you to relax. It's very powerful. So the Alzheimer's Family Manual does include several contemplations that people have used for themselves and for meetings with family members, because as a caregiver, it's very common that the other family members who are not doing the day-to-day caregiving have no clue about what your life is, have no clue about how deep the difficulties go in caring for someone 24 hours a day. So there are contemplations that you can share with family members that seem to have benefited people that you can look at to give them some insight into both the experience of the illness and insight into the experience of caregiving. So finally, we can talk about insight, wisdom. The insight is insight into the basic nature of how things are. You can bring a sense of humor to your life. In other words, we have a very fixed idea of what our life is like, but with applying some insight, we realize it's pretty much our storyline. Just like I really don't want a sign that says toilet with a picture of a toilet on my door in my house. Really, is that really that important? Probably not. The insight of looking at things in that redirected way, in that redirection from our own self-interest, our own self-concern, into caring for how do I protect another person from fear. That permeates all of the things we've been discussing. And what happens is the more you apply that, the sooner and sooner you recognize when the issues are arising. And the sooner you do it, the sooner you can take steps to make things easier. So, as we said in the beginning, we're talking about the whole experience of caregiving. And when you look at what happens, we can provide refuge to this person who really no longer has refuge that they can create for themselves. We can provide protection from someone who can no longer protect themselves. And we can provide companionship for someone whose family and friends may be disappearing. So all of this is based on that very simple premise that we talked about at the very beginning about that deepest sense of generosity, that deepest expression of generosity, which is giving protection from fear. So that's a brief summary of caregiving as a spiritual discipline. If there's any questions, we can open it up to a Q&A. If there are there questions that people put in the chats? No.
Want to show the coverage though?
Oh, yeah. one other set of slides that we would make a point about in terms of simplifying and standardizing. Okay, we can look at what a cluttered. Which one are you showing? This is a cabinet. If you imagine that you have dementia and you're going to look for something in that cabinet, there's nothing clear about that. There's nothing that identifies what you're supposed to be doing. Think about how difficult that is, as opposed to if you're looking for glassware, you have that label covered door, and then you have then you open that door and you see that. Which one is easier? It's very clear which one is easier. You can also look at a drawer for silverware. You have the silverware drawer?
Yep.
So you can look and open up the drawer and you see the silverware. And one of them is very easy to access. And one of them yeah. Look at the difference. If you want your loved one to help with the house, make them feel like they're part of this world, if you have a drawer which is easy for them to access versus a drawer which makes no sense to them. So these are, again, we're showing these pictures because these are very simple things that you actually can do, that are actually very generous, that actually will have an immediate positive effect. So there are more of those kinds of things in the Alzheimer's Family Manual, and definitely lots more in the Montessori Alzheimer's Project. So, okay, a question about caregiving when your loved one is in a facility. Yes, that's true. So the question is asking me to talk a little bit about the role of caregiving when your loved one is in a care facility. There's a lot of disorientation. This is true. A family can help settle them while they're visiting, but as soon as they're gone, the person with dementia gets agitated again. So when your person that you care about, that you're caring for, can no longer live in the house, that's not working anymore, and you need to move them into a facility, what do you do? First, you have to create the orientation as best you can. So when you're moving them into a room, bring things from their room, from their bedroom. A few things that they will recognize. On the door of their room in the facility, because the facilities have lots of doors that all look the same, have a picture of them. But when you put a picture of them on the door, don't put the picture of them as they are now. Have a picture of them as they are now, and have a picture of them when they were younger. Because when they think about what they look like, you don't know which life period image they're going to grab. They may be 60, 70 years old, but they may be thinking of themselves when they were 30. In order to help them orient, one of the things we recommend is creating a picture book with pictures of their life, and have little written things so that the caregivers in the facility, especially when your loved one starts to get agitated, can bring this out and say, oh, let's look at this. Here's your daughter. This is your daughter when she was born. She was so small. So you have the picture and you have a shout it. Think about their favorite music. Make a, when you had tapes, but a mixed music CD of some kind, so that staff at the facility can play for them something that would be calming, understood, and call up warm feelings from the past. Memories of the past are much stronger than current memories when you have dementia. The old memories stay around. Like my father used to tell me, you know, I can remember what happened in 1936 like it's happening right in front of me, and I can't remember what I did 2 minutes ago. Give them something they can access. The other thing is, in a facility, you need to watch. You need to look when you go visit, before you just go visit your loved one. You want to make sure the facility is doing the right things. Watch how the lowest paid staff at the facility touches the residents. If they touch them gently, if they touch them with warmth, if they lead them gently, that's a good thing. If they speak sharply, if they don't look at them when they're talking to them, this is not a good situation. The other thing in the facility, which is connected with agitation, which I have deep personal experience about with my father, is you need to look at the medications that your loved one is being given. At home, you know what the medications are. You can talk to your doctor and figure out, is this working? Is it not working? Are there side effects? When they're in a facility, doctors are prescribing medication, and they're not necessarily eliminating medications when they do that. There is a massive overprescribing of psychoactive drugs that are not there for the benefit of your loved one. They are there for patient management. You need to be very cautious about drugs. Some drugs can be helpful, and sometimes they're very necessary. But there are many drugs that people with dementia are given that are contraindicated for dementia. You're not supposed to give them for dementia. Dementia is not a psychosis. Giving antipsychotic medications in a facility is a bad thing. There it is. I've said it publicly. It is a bad thing. The other thing you can do, especially if you live a bit further away and you can't go visit this person you care about, that you cared for, very often, you can, because of the miracles of phones these days, have video calls rather than calling them and just talking, so that they can see your face, whether it's FaceTime, whether it's Telegram or any of those things. You want to be able to see the face, because that's a reference point for this person who doesn't necessarily remember your name or your voice. And again, introduce yourself. When you go to visit, wear a name tag. Wear a name tag so that if they're not certain, they can look at your name tag. Introduce yourself. I'm your son, I'm your daughter, it's so good to see you. Encourage the staff at the facility to do the same things. Simplify the environment in the facility that is with your loved one. Make sure their room is simple, clear, and has identification on the doors, on the drawers. We like lots of different clothes. I know people who have like lots of different, pants and shirts and socks and all these different things. Simplification. Basic colors that will match no matter what they put on. A few things, not lots of things. All of these things are helpful. I hope that's helpful. Is there any other question on the chat? No? Oh, yes, thank you. Okay. We have a question here in person. Yes. No, Alzheimer's is not the same as Parkinson's. Alzheimer's affects the brain, and generally speaking, depending on which part of the brain it affects first, you'll have different kind of symptoms. There are certain kinds of dementia that you end up having lots of anger, like immediate anger and uncontrollable emotions. Parkinson's has to do with controlling the muscles. But if you think about how to apply these things, you can apply them to people with Parkinson's. In other words, if you have someone you're caring for who has Parkinson's, their balance is not as good as it used to be. Don't have things all over the floor. We drop things all the time. So we throw our shoes here, or we drop this there. Don't do that. And again, if you think about somebody with Parkinson's taking a glass out of a cupboard that has 30 different glasses all jammed in there, it's hard. Simplify. They don't need the signage aspect of it because their ability to remember is not impacted, generally speaking, right? But if you just have 2 forks, that's different than having a crowded silverware drawer with 10 of this, 20 of this, 4 of this, 5 of this. Simple. What you're doing is you're adjusting the environment to what their needs and abilities are, and it will have tremendous benefit. So yes. Parkinson's, the memory is not really affected, to my knowledge. Not like that. What's the reasonable expectation for family members to try to extend the life of a person in the last stage dementia who's lost their mind, cognition, even the ability to swallow? To outsiders, the care makes them suffer more. Oh, that's a wonderful, difficult question. Okay, so my personal experience. As I said, my father lived for about 15 years after he was diagnosed, and he did get to the phase, absolutely. At the end of his life, he stopped drinking liquids. He stopped eating. He could not swallow. And one of my friends who was a doctor told me, oh, well, when they stop eating, they can still live, for a week, 2 weeks, whatever. They'll starve, but they can still live for a while. But if you don't drink liquids, 3-4 days, that's it. My father lived for 13, 14, 15 days without drinking anything. And he was already desiccated from having very little to begin with. He didn't eat for 20-something days. So the question is extending the life of a person in that last stage. This comes up all the time. So there are things called do not resuscitate orders. So if you're in a hospital and you have a stroke, do you want someone trying to repair the damage from a stroke to let someone with dementia live longer? If they're in the later stages, you really have a difficult decision. You want them to stay. Their body may be telling them it's time to leave. Everyone needs to answer this question for themselves. I can only tell you what I did and what people that I know in this situation have done. So my father started having a series of very, very small strokes. They're called TIAs. And my mother was adamant that she wanted the doctors to do everything to keep him alive. And I pointed out, what are you bringing him back to? And she admitted, the fact was that she wasn't ready to let go. And I think we have to be honest about what we're capable of doing. So I didn't criticize her because that was her experience. But when my father was at the very last stages, she said to me, this is too difficult. And she wanted me to put a pillow over his head and end his life. And my mother was not a big woman, but she threw me against the wall to demand that I do that. And I told her that what my father was going through at this point was no longer connected with the disease. This is the process of dying. And the disease was not impacting him at that point. This is just how your mind and body separate. And she asked me if this was true, and I said yes. And she relaxed, and then my father died 2 days later. I think she was experiencing a lot of pressure because the people in hospice were telling her at that point for 10 or 12 days that he was going to die that very day. And it was just too much pressure for her. So one other direct experience that I can pass on, and again, this is just my experience. Everyone really does need to figure out for themselves what they're capable of doing and what they think is the kindest thing to do and how to bring those together. Near my parents' home, they had a very good friend who, after my father was sick for 7 or 8 years, this other neighbor also became sick with Alzheimer's. He was diagnosed. His wife put him in the car, drove him to the same facility that my father was in at that point, and never went back to see him again. My mother called me up and said, "Oh, I never would have thought that she could be so cruel. And the man died in 30 days. And my mother was very upset, and I pointed out to my mother that every time my mother went to see my father, and she would say goodbye, she would say, I will see you tomorrow. I will come back tomorrow, or I will come back Thursday, whatever it is, I will be there. And you're giving him the message that he should stay. She gave him the message that it's okay to go. So it took my mother a few years, but she finally started saying goodbye to him differently. She finally started saying goodbye to him, saying that, I'm leaving now, I'm fine, you don't have to worry about me. And that actually started the process of him letting go himself. So I think that extending the life of someone is a decision every family has to make, members of the family have to make. In my family's case, we did not try to extend his life. We did not try to make it go away faster. But again, you have to have the stability of mind to be able to sit with the person as they're passing away in that long process. And that's not easy. So when I would visit my father, I would sit there for 4 or 5 hours, sometimes less, sometimes more, and just breathe with him. So again, that notion of extending the stability of your mind to this person who can't generate stability for themselves. Okay, so we have another couple of questions. One comment, thank you for sharing your experience. It's an unfortunate thing to have to say that it's my pleasure, but to the extent that there's benefit of me sharing my experience, that was the inspiration for doing the original audio tape and for writing these books, to share my experience. Not that I know more than everybody by any means at all, but rather that by showing for my particular situation what worked and what didn't work, I could help other people avoid problems that they might encounter. I could help other people help their loved ones without having to go through the same educational process that my family did. So as a family member, how do you educate yourself on things like contraindications when someone's in long-term care? The relationship with the physician is quite distant, and they're often family physicians rather than mental health or geriatricians, especially here in British Columbia. Do you have suggestions about where to educate ourselves about psychiatric medications for dementia? Our family is finding the whole medication thing very difficult to navigate. Yes, that's correct. It is difficult to navigate. Again, I try to give real-life examples. At one point, my father was going to be thrown out of a facility that was a special facility for people with dementia. They were going to throw him out because he had grabbed the sink in his room and yanked it out of the wall. My father was not a big, giant, strong man, but he yanked it out of the wall. And a day or two later, he went to the doorways where they have those 2 doors that you have to push with both hands to open, and he ripped it off the hinge and threw it. And they called my mother and said, "We're getting rid of him." My mother panicked. She called me. I flew down, and I walked in, and I said, "This is not a product of dementia. There's something else going on. What medications is he on?" And they said, "We're not going to tell you." Literally, they said, "We're not going to tell you. That's not your business." For those of you who don't know, I practiced law for 40 years, and I pointed out to the nurse on duty that I would file a lawsuit and put as much in the newspapers as possible and destroy their business if they didn't show me what drugs they were giving my father. They immediately showed me the drugs they were giving my father. And I wrote them down and I looked them up, and there were 3 of them that were antipsychotic medications that were contraindicated for dementia. So the first thing is you have to have the ability to get the medication names. Some of them are generic names, some of them are trademark names. You get those names and you can go on the internet, WebMD or whatever it is, the Mayo Clinic, and you can see what the drug is, if it is contraindicated, what the side effect is. These are very important things. Full disclosure, I took some of the drugs that my father was given because I wanted to find out what they did to my mind. And when I say these drugs are given often for patient management and not for the benefit of the patients, that's my personal experience. I took those drugs. I know what some of them do. Okay, so what do? You find out what the medications are, and you go tell them, you contact the doctor, and you say you cannot do this. And doctors will not listen to you sometimes unless you threaten them. And you can certainly write a letter to the Office of the Senior Advocate in British Columbia. You can certainly write a letter to the BC College of Physicians. People should not be given drugs that are contraindicated for their illness. It is difficult. It is something you do need to keep up on. So hopefully that's helpful. Less drugs is better. I'll give you another silly example. This is another silly example. Personal experience. I went to visit my father, and I sat down to breakfast at this facility he was in, and they're giving all the residents coffee. Why are you giving my father coffee? One of the biggest problems in facilities is patients wandering all day and all night. And the answer I was given was, we give everybody coffee because we think it'll bring them back memories of when they had coffee and it was a nice time. I said, give them hot water. The warmth they will understand. You don't need to give them caffeine. And they said, no, this is what we do. So I went into the head of the facility, and I said, how much coffee do you drink a day? She looked at me and she said, I have a cup every day, but I have to have it before 11 o'clock in the morning, because if I have it after 11 o'clock in the morning, I am up all night. And I said, on my father's medical record, I do not want him having any coffee at all. If you can't have coffee after 11 o'clock, why are you giving coffee 3 times a day to these people and having coffee in the afternoon as well? These are, when I say the Montessori Alzheimer's Project is about adjusting the environment, it's adjusting the environment at home, and it's also applying those same needs for adjustments in facilities. These are all things that are important. They are generous. They are kind. And I don't want to knock all the facilities because they have a very, very difficult job. Very, very difficult job. Always thank the people in the facilities who touch your loved one or other people's loved ones with warmth and with kindness. Always thank them. Okay. I appreciate your thanks. Caring for my elderly, normal aging parents, I notice they often live in their memories. Almost every time when we talk about current events, they quickly shift the topic and relate to their old memories. What can I do to help them live in the present? Well, who wants to live in the present? You do. There's a reason why they're going to the past. They feel confident there, they feel safe there, it brings up warmth for them. This is actually very important. If you start talking about things that are current, it may trigger all kinds of fears that you don't even know about that they have. Like, there are people who lived through World War II, lived through the Korean War, lived through this war, lived through that war, had difficulties as dealing with their own families or immigration or things like that. If they want to relax into good memories, help build a memory book with them so that if something happens and they get dementia at some point, you already are creating something for them. There's one more thing I really want to emphasize about facilities and also about home, about adjusting the environment. Sorry, I forgot about this before. In facilities, they often have the TV going all the time. At home, you may have the TV going all the time. When you look at the television, every time a commercial comes on, there are rapidly changing images, there are rapidly changing sounds, the volume goes up and down. It's something trying to grab your attention. Most of the ads, you can't even tell what they're for. Think about if you have dementia and you're actually trying to follow the story that you're watching on television. You don't know that this advertisement is not part of the story. You're not necessarily going to make that leap of logic that you and I might make because we're not sick. Don't have the TV on all the time. When you have the TV on, have a movie on. Have an old television show that you have on a DVD with no commercials. It's a way to relax. It's a way to help them maintain their ability to follow a story. It could be their minds can't hold more information about what's current. It's too difficult. That is true. There's a lot of difficult things in the world. A lot of difficult. I know someone who lived through the Japanese invasion of Canton, Guangdong. And when this particular person sees what's going on in that part of the world now, it brings back all kinds of fears of when he was very small. So think about how difficult things are today. Wouldn't it be nicer to think about, when we all gathered together for this Thanksgiving and we had a nice dinner and we played games and the kids were here, it was all very lovely. Or when you graduated from high school and we were all so happy and proud. That's what's important. For someone who is aging or someone who is unwell, don't challenge them, reassure them. Any other questions? Yes, no, maybe so? Okay, so, when your loved one forgets, for example, their spouse has passed away, in terms of speech and patience, how could that be handled? This is a very good question. It's a very common experience. And as I say it's a common experience, I will tell you my experience. My father was ill, but still living at home, still able to speak. And there were a few people over for dinner, and my mother said something about her mother. My father, who had not been able to participate in the conversation, leaned forward in his chair and said, "She was the sweetest woman. She always loved me. She was so kind to me." And my mother just, that was so wonderful for her to hear. And she looked at my father, and there were these 4 or 5 guests there, and she just smiled at him and said, "Yes, she did love you." And my father looked at her and said, "How would you know? You weren't there." And he got very angry at this person who was making this stuff up. He was thinking of my grandmother and my mother when my mother was 20 or 25 years old. And at the time my mother was over 60. She didn't look the same. He's looking at this woman saying this and saying, "You weren't there." That's his mind. So in terms of speech and patience, you could just say, "Yes, Dad or Mom, yeah, they're wonderful people." Very easy. Because you think about it, and it's your desire for them to know that someone has died, and your desire to know that you are sad and that they were sad. Allow them to live in what their experience is. When you go home and you want to be upset, that's fine. Just don't be upset in front of them, because they will key off of your emotional discomfort. Is dementia inherited? What's the major cause? Okay, there are very, very small groups of people within families where there's a specific genetic flaw that you will get dementia, or the odds are 50-50 that you're going to get dementia, or even more. There's a family in Colombia that they traced back to a genetic flaw in the 1850s. There's, I think, a family in Turkey. There's a few of those kinds of things. Other than that, there are causes of dementia, or there are genetic inherited things that happen that will give you a higher likelihood, but it's not a massive likelihood. It's a higher likelihood. So I think that anybody whose parent is sick, they have a different experience than someone who is not in the family line. So a child will have a different experience than a spouse. So for me, if I forget where I put my wallet, is this it? Someone else who doesn't have it in the family line, hey, where did I put my wallet? So that's part of working with your own fear. And that's something that I think you need to do. Everyone needs to do. So again, if you simplify your world, you standardize it, you don't necessarily need signs yet, the more you do that, the easier it will be. So Montessori principles, most people are familiar with Montessori schools, like for preschools or things like that, which my wife founded. And if you go into one Montessori classroom that's done properly, everything has its own place. It's clear, it all goes together. All the reds are together, all the greens are together, this items are together, these items are together. So they're always put back in the same place. If you start doing that, it will make your life easier. So, but don't be alarmed at the fact that if it's in your family line that you will be frightened. I set up the first, in Santa Barbara, Alzheimer's Association, the first support group for children whose parents had dementia. And it was extraordinary. Everyone had the same experience, no matter what their religion, no matter what their culture, no matter how much money they had. Every single person, it was the largest opening meeting of a support group they'd ever had in Santa Barbara. Every one of those people said, I am not going to allow my children to have to take care of me like this. So it is something which is on people's minds. Pay attention, figure out how you can adjust your environment to protect yourself from fear. Talk to people. Talk to the people that you love. Anything else? Yes?
Possible that people get both Parkinson's and Alzheimer's?
Sure. Yes.
You want to repeat the question?
Oh, I'm sorry. I should repeat the question. Thank you. Yeah, is it possible for one person to get both Parkinson's and some form of dementia? And the answer is yes. Just like you could have cancer and you could have a stroke. Different body systems, right? So yes, it can happen. And there actually was an op-ed piece in one of the, somewhere that I read about someone whose father does have Parkinson's and does have late stages of dementia, and how difficult that is. And again, that same question of people saying to this person, you should extend your father's life as long as possible, and other people saying what you're doing is causing him more pain. And that's why I say that's not a judgment that anyone can make for you. They can support you in what your judgment is without criticism. And that's what I've always tried to do in counseling families. I can tell what my experience is, but I have to support whatever you want to do. Okay. So I think that may be it. Okay. One more. How come we hear more and more dementia cases these days? Is it because physically we can live longer, but our brains can't do the same? In many ways, yes. If you look at when my father became sick at the age of 54, he was considered young to have dementia. But that was kind of where the transition was, where people were in their 50s, they were considered young. Most people with dementia these days, it gets diagnosed when they're older. So yes, we start to, the course of our bodies, we do start to break down as we get older. But with respect to dementia, when I was at the Santa Barbara Alzheimer's Association, we had two families where the parents in their 50s were taken care of. In both cases, it was a son in their late 20s who had dementia. So it does affect people of all ages. Rare when they're very young, but that actually was originally when Alzheimer's, Dr. Alois Alzheimer in like 1915 or 17 or whatever. That was when he started creating the diagnosis or figuring out what was going on. It was with very young people, and it was originally called, before they named it after him, it was called pre-senile dementia, meaning you had dementia, but you were way too young to have it. So, okay. All right. I hope it was helpful. Okay, thank you all very much for attending. And thank the monastery in Trungpa Rinpoche for providing this space to do it. And again, if there are other questions, I think if you look on, I'm pretty sure if it's on Facebook and on YouTube for the monastery's sites, it will have our website, themontessorialzheimersproject.com. And there's more material there. And the books, if you're interested, are available on Amazon. And if you have questions, you can contact me through the Montessori Alzheimer's Project, and I'll do my best to be helpful. So thank you very much. By this merit may all attain omniscience, may defeat the enemy wrongdoing, from the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death, from the ocean of samsara may I free all beings. For the Buddhists, that's very conventional to say at the end. For the non-Buddhists, basically it's the aspiration that we can alleviate the suffering of ourselves and others. Thank you very much. Bye-bye. Okay. Thank you. So are you the host? Okay, so you can end the meeting? Thank you. Okay. So thank you.